Benjamin Solomon Carson was born in Detroit, Michigan on September 18, 1951, the second son of Sonia and Robert Solomon Carson. Ben grew up in the hardened climate of inner-city Detroit. Ben's mother was raised in Tennessee in a very large family. She dropped out of school in the third grade. With not much hope or perspective in life, she married Baptist minister Robert Carson when she was 13. Believing that he would change her life, the couple moved to Detroit, Michigan, and for a time the marriage was a success. Carson showered his wife with gifts and attention, but over time, Robert Carson changed. Though he could also be domineering and erratic, in time, Sonia felt it was best for her sons if she and Robert divorced. Ben was 8 and Curtis, Ben's brother, was 10. When Sonia was left to raise the children on her own, the family was very poor. And to make ends meet, Sonia sometimes took on 2 or 3 jobs at a time in order to provide for her boys. Most of the jobs she had were as a domestic servant. There were occasions when her boys wouldn't see her for days at a time because she would go to work at 5 a.m. and come back home around 11 p.m., going from one job to the next. Carson's mother was frugal with the family's finances, cleaning and patching clothes from the Goodwill in order to dress the boys. The family would also go to local farmers and offer to pick corn or other vegetables in exchange for a portion of the yield. Her actions and the way she managed the life proved to be a tremendous influence on Ben and Curtis. Sonia also taught her boys that anything was possible. By his recollection many years later, Ben Carson had thoughts of a career in medicine, though it was more of a fantasy man young children harbor as they grew up because his family was on medical assistance. They would have to wait for hours to be seen by one of the interns at the hospital. Ben would listen to the pulse of the hospital as doctors and nurses went about their routines. The poverty he lived in and the difficult times he experienced in school seemed to increase the anger and rage. Determined to turn her sons around, Sonia limited their TV time to just a few selected programs and refused to let them go outside to play until they finished their homework. She was criticized for this by her friends, who said her boys would grow up to hate her, but she was determined that her sons would have greater opportunities than she
We lived
ever
in the
did.
inner city, single parent home, dire poverty. My mother only had a third grade education. I was perhaps the worst student you've ever seen. I thought I was really stupid. All my classmates and teachers agreed. And, my nickname was Dummy. But, fortunately, I continued to hold on to that dream. And, when I was in the 5th grade, my mother put us on this reading program and said we had to read 2 books apiece from the Detroit Public Library and submit to her written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. She'd put a little check mark on them and act like she was reading them.
Later, at Southwestern High School in inner-city Detroit, his science teachers recognized his intellectual abilities and mentored him. Other teachers helped him to stay focused when outside influences pulled him off course. After Ben graduated with honors from high school, Carson was determined to achieve his goals. He knocked on doors looking for a summer work and usually, through persistence, was able to obtain one. From this work and a scholarship, he attended Yale University and earned a bachelor's degree in psychology. Despite his academic success, Ben Carson still had a raging temper that translated into violent behavior as a child. One time, he tried to hit his mother with a hammer because she disagreed with his choice of clothes. Another time, he inflicted a major head injury on a classmate in a dispute over a locker. In a final incident, Ben nearly stabbed to death a friend after arguing over a choice of radio stations. The only thing that prevented a tragic occurrence was the knife blade broke on the friend's belt buckle. Not knowing the extent of his friend's injury, Ben ran home and locked himself in the bathroom with a Bible. Terrified by his own actions, he started praying, asking God to help him find a way to deal with his temper. He found salvation in the book of Proverbs and a passage that went, "Better a patient man than a warrior, a man who controls his temper than one who takes a city." Ben began to realize that much of his anger stemmed from putting himself in the center of everything. Anytime anything happened that was not to his liking, he internalized it and made it his problem. Once he took himself out of the equation, he could see that not everything was directed at him and that he wasn't the only one with troubles. He began to see things from other points of view. He soon realized that he could control his anger rather than it controlling him. He realized his future depended on the choices he made and the degree of energy he put into his life. Seeing that living in the inner city was only temporary, Carson believed he had the full power to change his situation.
Another youngster angered me, and I had a large camping knife, and I tried to stab him in the abdomen. And fortunately, he had on a large metal belt buckle under his clothing, and the knife blade struck with such force that it broke, and he fled in terror. But I was more terrified as I recognized that I was trying to kill somebody over nothing. And this was after I had turned my grades around. I was an A student at that time. But I realized at that moment that with a temper like that, my options were three: reform school, jail, or the grave. None of those options appealed to me. So, I just locked myself up in the bathroom and I started praying, and I said, Lord, I can't deal with this temper. And I picked up my Bible and I started reading from the book of Proverbs. That was the first day that I started doing it, and I've been doing it every day since then, because it had all these verses in it about anger, and it seemed like they were all applicable to me. And while I was there, I had a revelation. And that revelation was that the reason I was always angry is because I was always in the center of the equation. He said, just step out of the center of the equation, and then everything won't be directed at you, and then you won't be angry. And also you'll be able to look at things from other people's points of view. And also, where I lived, it was sort of like a macho thing. You get angry, you kick down the wall, and you punch in the window, and it makes you into a big man. But, I came to understand that when you react like that, it actually is a sign of weakness, because it means that other people and the environment can control you. And I decided that I didn't want to be that easily controlled. And I've never had another problem with temper since that day.
Ben Carson has accomplished many medical achievements in his lifetime. After he earned his medical degree, he began working as a surgeon at Johns Hopkins in 1977. By 1982, he was the chief resident in neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. The next year, he got an invitation from Sir Charles Gardner Hospital in Australia to take a neurosurgeon position. He hesitantly accepted. It was a great decision because he gained plenty of experience and became a better surgeon. He then came back to Johns Hopkins after a year in Australia. In 1985, he became the director of pediatric neurosurgery. He was only 33 years old. That same year was when he performed an operation to separate two 7-month-old conjoined twins from Germany. Although the surgery was very difficult and life-threatening, the surgery went well considering the circumstances. The twins survived with only a bit of brain damage. Ben Carson was the first to perform this surgery and have the patients live through it.
Well, pediatric neurosurgery became fascinating to me more because I didn't like adult neurosurgery, in the sense that there were so many chronic back pain patients in adult neurosurgery, and they never got better no matter what you did until they got their settlement. So, it seemed like there were just so many secondary gain issues and things. And with children, what you see is what you get. You couple that with the fact that I like to do complex things. So, you can sit there and you can do these enormously complex operations on old people, and it might be successful. And your reward is they live for 5 years. Whereas with a kid, you do this incredibly complex thing, and your reward may be 50, 60, or 70 years. So, I'd like to get a big return on my investment. So I'd rather go with the kids.
2003, Ben Carson faced what was perhaps his biggest challenge. Are you listening? Because he separated adult conjoined twins, Layden and Leah Benjanji, were Iranian girls who were joined at the head. as they told Carson at one point, "We would rather die than spend another day together." This type of medical procedure had never been attempted on conjoined adults because the outcome would almost certainly result in death. Carson had been conducting brain surgery for nearly 20 years and had performed several craniophagus separations. Carson and a team of more than 100 surgeons, specialist assistants traveled to Singapore in Southeast Asia on July 6, 2003. Carson and his team began the nearly 52 operation. During the operation, they followed digital reconstruction of the twins' brains. Besides the girl's age, the surgery revealed more difficulties because the brains not only shared major blood vessels, but had fused together. The separation was completed at 1:30 p.m. on July 8th, but it was soon apparent that the girls were in deep critical condition. Both lost a large volume of blood due to the complications of the surgery. 2:30 p.m., Layden died on the operating table. His sister Leah died a short time later.
As Carson wrote in his book, they would always exsanguinate. They would bleed to death, and I said, there's got to be a new way around that. I was talking to a friend of mine who was a cardiothoracic surgeon, who was the chief of division, and I said, you guys operate on the heart on babies. How do you keep them from exsanguinating? And he said, well, we put them in a hypothermic arrest. I said, is there any reason that if we are doing a set of Siamese twins that they were joined at the head, that we couldn't put them into hypothermic arrest? At the appropriate time, we were likely to lose a lot of blood, and he said, no way. 2 months later along came these doctors from Germany, presenting his case of Siamese twins, and I was asked for my opinion. And I then began to explain the techniques that should be used, and how we would incorporate hypothermic arrest. And my colleagues and I, a few of us went over to Germany. We looked at the twins. We actually put in scalp expanders, and 5 months later we brought them over and did the operation. And lo and behold it worked.
I was talking to a friend of mine who was a cardiothoracic surgeon, who was the chief of the division, and I said, you know, you guys operate on the heart and babies. How do you keep them from exsanguinating? And he says, well, we put them in hypothermic arrest. And I said, is there any reason that if we were doing a set of Siamese twins that were joined at the head, that we couldn't put them into hypothermic arrest at the appropriate time when we're likely to lose a lot of blood? He said, no. And I said, wow, this is great. And then I said, why am I putting my time into this? I'm not going to see any Siamese twins. So I kind of forgot about it. And lo and behold, 2 months later, along came these doctors from Germany presenting this case of Siamese twins. And, you know, I was asked for my opinion, and I then began to explain, you know, the techniques that should be used and how we would incorporate hypothermic arrest. And everybody said, wow, you know, that sounds like it might work. And, you know, so, my colleagues and I, a few of us went over to Germany. We looked at the twins. We actually put in scalp expanders. And 5 months later, we brought them over and did the operation, and lo and behold, it worked.
In 2001, CNN and Time magazine named Ben Carson as one of the nation's 20 foremost physicians and scientists. In that same year, the Library of Congress selected him as one of 89 living legends. In 2006, he received the Singram Medal, the highest honor bestowed by the NAACP. In February 2008, President Bush awarded Carson the Ford's Theater Lincoln Medal and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the U.S. highest civilian honor. In 2009, actor Cuba Gooding Jr. portrayed Carson in the TNN television production Gifted Hands.
The human brain is the thing that makes you who you are. And I never get over my awe of the brain. You know, when I open up, you know, this week I was doing a hemispherectomy on a child, and I'm looking at that brain, and that's an operation where we remove half of the brain to stop intractable seizures. But I'm saying, this is the thing that makes this person who they are. And, you know, if I were to expose my brain and expose your brain and put them side by side, you know, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And yet, we're very, very different people.